The Cole mansion in Newport Beach glowed brightly in the night, its glass windows reflecting the silver moonlight like eyes that refused to close. For the past 6 months, the house had not known peace. The cries of 4 newborns echoed through the marble hallways, mingling with the hurried footsteps of nurses, caregivers, and nannies rotating through their shifts. Nathaniel Cole, 35 years old, had once been the man who made all of Wall Street hold its breath every time he made a decision. His signature alone could alter the fate of multinational corporations, and yet now, he was utterly powerless before 4 tiny beings, the final embodiment of his marriage with his late wife, Isabella. Her death during the delivery of their quadruplets had left a wound so deep that every victory in the corporate world had become meaningless. In desperate attempts, Nathan had hired not 1, but 2 full-time nannies. One was Victoria Hale, 30 years old, a graduate of a prestigious nursing school, with experience working for several high-class families. On paper, Victoria was the perfect choice. Professional demeanor, impressive qualifications, confident that she could manage 4 infants. The other was Clara Evans, only 23, her blonde hair tied back, her brown eyes soft and gentle. She had nothing but patience and a heart that had endured much deprivation. Growing up in an orphanage in Los Angeles, Clara had never known a mother's embrace. She was only hired because they needed an extra pair of hands, mostly to assist Victoria with small tasks. From the very first day, the contrast was clear. Victoria entered the nursery with a meticulously written schedule, issuing orders to the nurses for every detail. Clara quietly followed, changing diapers, wiping bottles, picking up dropped towels. If anyone cared to notice, they would see Clara's hands trembling slightly, yet her eyes always remained tender when gazing at those flushed, crying little faces. But Victoria's flawless plans quickly fell apart. The 4 babies, Olivia, Jack, Noah, and Emma, seemed to reject every method. Scientific lullabies, Mozart played through the night, even old folk remedies. Nothing could soothe them to sleep. They cried until their voices went hoarse, as if calling out for the mother who was gone forever. Nathan often entered the nursery at 3 in the morning, his eyes darkened with exhaustion, his tie still hanging loose around his collar after a day of endless meetings. He would find Victoria clutching her head, signaling impatiently for the nurse to bring eardrops, while Clara crouched quietly in a corner, gently patting baby Emma's back in a rhythm of patience. 3 weeks passed, then 4, and weariness etched itself deep into Victoria's face. One evening, after Jack vomited for the 3rd time in just an hour, Victoria broke down in tears right in front of Nathan. "Mr. Cole, I cannot go on. This is no longer a job. This is torture. I'm sorry." Without waiting for his response, she packed her things and left the mansion that very night in the pouring rain. Everyone thought Nathan would immediately replace her with another professional. But in that chaotic moment, when Olivia, Noah, and Jack all cried at once, only Clara remained. She did not leave, she did not panic. Instead, she stepped up to the cribs, cradled baby Emma first, then one by one, all the rest. She placed the 4 tiny angels together on the wide bed so they could touch one another, and began to sing softly. It was not a classical melody, nor a scientifically approved lullaby. It was an old song a Spanish staff member at the orphanage had once taught her. Her voice was fragile, but filled with warmth. Within minutes, the cries weakened, and 4 pairs of red, teary eyes slowly drifted closed. Nathan stood silently by the half-open door. Before his eyes was a sight he had not witnessed in 6 months. A quiet room, 4 children, peacefully asleep, and at the center, Clara, the girl he had hardly ever noticed, sitting like an angel keeping watch. He did not step inside, he did not say a word. Only when he realized his shoulders were trembling with emotion did Nathan quietly retreat, leaving the room immersed in its fragile peace. For the first time in half a year, the Cole mansion had a quiet night. And it all began with one assistant nanny, with no diploma, no status, Clara Evans. Dawn cast a pale golden light over Newport Beach. Inside the Cole mansion, it was rare to have a morning not shattered by cries. The 4 infants were still fast asleep, their breathing steady. No one knew that this peace had come from the small hands of an unrecognized assistant nanny. Nathaniel Cole entered his study, his face less weary than before. But instead of gratitude, his eyes were filled with sternness. To Nathan, order in this house mattered as much as any shareholders' meeting. And last night, Clara Evans had crossed a boundary. He pressed the bell, summoning all the staff to the grand hall. The clicking of shoes echoed against the marble floor as everyone gathered, from chefs and kitchen assistants to nurses and cleaning staff. At the center stood the housekeeper, Margaret Maggie Dawson, tall and composed, her gray-blue eyes sharp, carrying the authority of 2 decades serving the Cole family. Beside her lingered the slight figure of her daughter Sophia Dawson, wiping her kitchen-stained hands on an apron. Nathan appeared, tall and imposing in a light gray suit. His voice rang out, deep and resolute. "Last night, I discovered a violation of the rules in how my children were cared for." Every eye turned forward. Clara stood at the back of the line, head bowed, her trembling hands clasped together. "Miss Evans." Nathan turned, his voice so cold that the air itself seemed to freeze. "You were hired as support, not to replace the head nanny or to make independent decisions about the children's care." The room stiffened. Clara raised her head, her brown eyes glistening, yet still brave enough to answer. "Mr. Cole, last night Victoria left. The babies would not stop crying. I simply could not bear to see them like that." A wave of whispers spread. A few younger staff members looked uneasy, feeling pity. But others, especially Sophia, curved their lips in faint amusement, as though enjoying a performance. Nathan cut her off, his tone unyielding. "You think you know better than trained professionals? From now on, remember your place. This is an official warning. If you overstep again, you will leave this house." Clara's legs felt weak. Yet instead of pleading, she only nodded and whispered, "Yes, sir." Maggie stepped forward, her voice as sharp as a blade. "Mr. Cole is absolutely right. Order in a household is sacred. Everyone must remain in their proper place." Her eyes flicked toward Clara with heavy implication. Behind her, Sophia's lips twisted into a mysterious smile. Nathan flicked his hand dismissively. Meeting adjourned. Everyone back to work. The sound of footsteps echoed as the crowd dispersed, but Clara stayed rooted, eyes lowered, her back trembling. She caught the venomous whispers. "She actually thinks she's the mother of this house? Just a backup nanny." Clara's heart ached, yet in her memory lingered the faces of 4 babies sleeping peacefully last night. She knew she had not been wrong. Across the hall, Maggie and Sophia exchanged a swift glance. In the mother's eyes lay cold calculation. In Sophia's, a flicker of longing hunger, not just for power, but also for Nathan Cole himself. Back in the study, Nathan sank into his leather chair and closed his eyes. He wondered why the image from last night, Clara sitting among the 4 children, singing with a trembling yet tender voice, kept returning. He should have felt reassured, and yet instead, he felt unsettled. A feeling he had not yet named. Outside, Clara returned to the nursery. 4 clear eyes lifted to her, tiny hands reaching instinctively for familiar arms. Clara picked up baby Emma and smiled faintly through her tears. "Don't worry. Mama isn't here, but Sister Clara will always be with you." Her whispered words faded into the stillness of the room, leaving only the steady breaths of 4 little angels. And deep inside, Clara vowed she would never abandon them, even if the entire world turned its back. 3 days after the tense household meeting, the Cole mansion returned to its familiar state. Long nights filled with the wailing of infants, hallways crowded with footsteps. Nurses took turns on duty, but none of them had the strength to endure. Nathan hardly slept, his face growing more gaunt each day. On the 4th night, close to 3 in the morning, Jack's cries erupted through the upper floor. It wasn't the usual cry of hunger or discomfort, but a sharp, hoarse sound laced with desperation. Clara, who was mopping the hallway, startled and dropped her bucket. She rushed toward the nursery, Inside, a nurse struggled, her face tense. "Mr. Cole, the boy's fever is too high. I called Dr. Miller, but he's in another emergency case. It could take over an hour." Nathan clutched Jack, feeling the burning heat radiating from his small body. The boy screamed, his little hands gripping as if begging for help. Olivia, Noah, and Emma awoke, bursting into tears, turning the room into chaos. Nathan turned to the staff. "Is there nothing else we can do?" The only response was a helpless shake of the head. At that moment, Clara appeared in the doorway, still wearing her plain uniform. She didn't think, she simply set the mop aside and stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, let me try." Nathan looked at her outstretched hands, hesitating for a moment. But the desperate gaze of his son made him nod. He handed Jack to Clara. She pressed the boy against her chest, her palm patting gently, and softly began to sing. It was a Spanish lullaby she had once heard at the orphanage, a simple yet aching melody. Her voice was small, trembling, but warm like a mother's embrace. A miracle slowly unfolded. The heartbreaking cries faded. The tiny fists loosened. Within minutes, Jack nestled his face into Clara's shoulder, hiccuped a few times, then drifted into sleep. Even more astonishing, the other three, Olivia, Noah, Emma, also quieted. The room shifted from turmoil to peace, with only the lullaby echoing softly like a thread binding four little souls together. Nathan was stunned. He had never seen Jack so calm, much less witnessed all four at once, soothed in someone's arms. His heart clenched, a strange rush of emotions surging through relief mingled with grief. He asked quietly, his voice catching, "That song, what does it mean?" Clara kept singing, whispering in explanation. "It means, 'Sleep, my little boy. Sleep, my little piece of heart.'" Silence fell. Nathan watched the scene as if the world around him blurred away, leaving only the image of a young woman holding fragile lives, offering what dozens of nurses and doctors could not. A while later, Dr. Miller arrived in haste. He froze at the sight of Jack asleep, cheeks less flushed, breathing steadier. After examining him, the doctor nodded. "The fever has broken, nothing serious. I'd say the boy needed comfort more than medicine." Nathan turned to Clara, as if truly seeing her for the first time. She was not just an assistant nanny, not just an ordinary employee, she was someone capable of bringing peace. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice lower than before. For the first time, he spoke her name without coldness. Clara bowed her head, offering a fragile smile. "I only did what anyone would do, sir." But Nathan knew not everyone could have done it, and that truth unsettled his heart. For the rest of the night, Clara sat by the crib, taking turns soothing each baby when they stirred. Nathan stood silently at the doorway, not interfering. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to sink into a sense of safety, a feeling that had left him the day Isabella died. In the hallway, Sophia watched in secret. Her eyes glinted with displeasure at seeing Nathan linger so long before a lowly employee. She clenched her fists, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "You must replace her. You are the one who deserves that place." The mansion fell quiet again. But from that moment, the balance shifted. From a disregarded assistant nanny, Clara Evans had become the silent heart that allowed the Cole household to know peace. In the days that followed, peace gradually returned to the Cole mansion. Not completely. The four infants still cried when hungry, thirsty, or waking in the night. But the constant panic had disappeared. Whenever Clara was present, they sought her arms, her simple lullaby like an invisible thread binding them together. Nathan noticed this, and though he maintained his stern demeanor, the look in his eyes whenever they lingered on Clara had changed. There was quiet observation, something almost like gratitude, an emotion he had not yet allowed himself to acknowledge. But this change did not escape Margaret Maggie Dawson. The housekeeper in her 50s stood in the shadow of the staircase, watching Nathan hand a child to Clara, his expression softening. A cold glint flashed in her eyes. After 20 years tied to the Cole family, she was accustomed to being the one who orchestrated the rhythm of the household. Now, an orphan girl with no degree was slowly becoming its center. That evening, in the kitchen still scented faintly of stew, Maggie sat down beside her daughter Sophia, who was washing dishes. "You saw it, didn't you?" Her voice was low but sharp as a blade. "Saw what, Mother?" Sophia asked, wiping her hands on her apron, though her eyes stayed fixed on the doorway. "The way Mr. Cole looks at that girl, Clara, and the way the children cling to her." Sophia smirked. She had noticed long ago. Every time Nathan passed by the nursery, his eyes did not only seek his children, but lingered on Clara longer than necessary. And the children? They turned their faces away when held by others, yet reached out whenever Clara entered. "She's only an assistant nanny," Sophia said through clenched teeth. "An orphan with nothing." "Which makes her dangerous," Maggie replied. "Mr. Cole has lost his wife. His heart is weak. A girl like her, gentle, devoted, it is easy for a man to falter. Leave it long enough, and she will become something neither you nor I can ever replace." Sophia frowned, shivering slightly at the ice in her mother's tone. "So what do you want?" Maggie leaned closer, taking her daughter's damp hand firmly. "You must take that place, Sophia. Not her." "Me?" Sophia's cheeks flushed. "Yes. You are my daughter. You are worthy. If you become Mr. Cole's wife, we will no longer be servants in this house. We will have status, power, everything." Sophia fell silent. Since childhood, she had lived under her mother's shadow, this proud, cold woman who believed their fate deserved more. The thought of becoming the lady of the house made her heartbeat quicken. Yet an image of Nathan surfaced. A wealthy, powerful man, but also a grieving father. Could he ever love her truly, or was it just a foolish dream? Maggie seemed to read her hesitation. She squeezed her daughter's hand tightly, her voice firm. "Listen to me. Clara Evans must not remain in this position. As long as she is here, you will never have a chance. We must act." Sophia swallowed hard, then nodded. "I understand." That night, Clara stayed awake, watching over the children. She had no idea that outside the closed door, an alliance was being forged in the dark, the Dawson mother and daughter, one coldly calculating, the other burning with hunger for a different life. They shared one goal: to drive Clara out of the Cole mansion, clearing the path for themselves into a role she had never even imagined. The moon shone brightly over the wide garden, but deep inside the mansion, sparks of jealousy and ambition had begun to smolder. And Clara, with her arms wrapped around 4 tiny angels, did not yet know she had become the center of a battle that would decide the fate of the entire household. That afternoon, the smell of toasted bread drifted through the wide kitchen of the Cole mansion. Sophia stood before the oven, gloved hands sliding out a tray, the steam rising against her face. She glanced at the tiny security camera tucked near the spice rack, a corner hardly anyone noticed. Mother was right, she thought. Everything must be in order, and it starts with the kitchen. Clara appeared in the doorway, carrying a warm bottle and a cloth draped over her shoulder. Her face was weary from lack of sleep, yet her eyes remained gentle. "Miss Sophia, may I have some warm water?" Clara asked, her voice soft as if afraid to break the air. Sophia turned, her smile thin as paper. "The warm water is in the container at the back. Oh, and Clara, next time, don't leave bottles near the window. Sunlight spoils the milk." "Yes, thank you," Clara replied with a bow. She moved around the counter to pour water. Sophia waited until Clara turned her back, then nudged a glass jar with its lid slightly loose closer to the edge. When Clara turned, her elbow brushed it, sending it crashing to the floor, oatmeal scattering across the tiles. "Oh," Clara gasped, quickly picking up the shards. "Careful with your hands," Sophia cried, pressing the call button for cleaning staff. People rushed in, eyes curious. From the end of the hall, Margaret Dawson approached, her low heels tapping evenly. "What is this?" Maggie's voice was cold. Clara dropped the jar. "She said it was an accident," Sophia answered, carefully neutral. "But this is the dry food shelf. Rules say no milk bottles nearby." "I'm sorry," Clara stammered. "I'll clean it right away." Maggie scanned the room. her eyes pausing at the shelf corner where the security camera's small light blinked. "Pull the recording for me," she ordered the tech staff. "Kitchen rules are no joke." Clara froze. She knew she hadn't meant to, but knowing was one thing, proving it, another. That evening, Nathan received a brief report. Kitchen negligence. He frowned, but didn't summon anyone. Since Victoria's departure, he knew the household was like a vast machine, relearning how to run. Mistakes were bound to happen. That night, the babies stirred again. Olivia whimpered from gas. Noah fussed as if searching for something lost. Jack grew restless. Emma sucked her fingers raw. Clara cradled Jack in her arms, pacing, softly humming. The scent of warm milk and talcum powder mingled in the air. The nursery calmed, the sobs fading. Just as quiet returned, the door opened a crack. Nathan stood there, silent as a shadow. He said nothing, only handed Clara a glass of water. "Thank you," she whispered. A fragile moment stretched between them like a wooden bridge over a chasm carved by grief. "Tomorrow, you'll take half a day off," Nathan said. "I'll arrange a nurse." "It's all right, sir." "That's an order." Clara blinked in surprise, then gave a faint smile. "Yes, sir." The door closed. Clara sat in the rocking chair, gazing at the 4 angels in their cribs. Memories surged like a tide. Long ago, in the orphanage, she too had curled on a wooden bed, waiting for someone to come, waiting for a hand on her back. When no one came, she held herself and sang herself to sleep. And tonight, with these 4 children, she did the same, repaying the debt of her own childhood. By morning, whispers slipped through the halls. Clara, clumsy, broke a jar. Clara left milk by the window. Clara doesn't know kitchen rules. Words like tiny thorns, small but piercing deep. Clara walked faster, kept her head lower, her hands busy without pause. At noon, Dr. Miller visited. After his checkup, he said, "The babies are improving well. Limit noise, maintain a steady sleep schedule, and remember, milk should always be evenly warm, never too hot." "Yes," Clara nodded. Standing nearby, Sophia added smoothly, "Especially not left near the window, right, doctor?" "Sunlight." Miller nodded absently, missing the sarcasm. Clara pressed her lips together. "I'll be careful." That afternoon, Clara went down to warm milk. While she reached for a towel, someone had swapped the nipple for one with a larger hole. She didn't notice. When she lifted Noah, he sucked too hard, choked, and coughed until his face reddened. Clara's heart dropped. She quickly set the bottle aside, patting his back, angling him to breathe. "There, sweetheart. There." Sophia leaned against the doorway, tray of fresh cookies in her hands. "You don't know how to choose the right size nipple? Careful. Infants choke easily." This wasn't the one earlier," Clara stammered. "Really?" Sophia tilted her head, blinking innocently. "Or did you forget? Last time it was the jar, this time the nipple. Maybe you're just too tired?" Clara hugged Noah tighter, as if holding her own heart. She didn't argue. Every excuse would sound empty. She just kept patting, humming softly, until his coughs faded into steady breaths. From the kitchen's shadows, Maggie watched, her thin lips sealed. Drip by drip, she thought. No need for scandal. Just let them see her carelessness. A short meeting was called in the side room. Maggie voiced concerns about procedure. Her tone was low, but heavy as stone. "Infants require professionalism. I suggest hiring another qualified nanny." Nathan sat silent, fingers interlaced. His eyes drifted to Clara standing by the door, hands stained with dried milk, hair tied hastily. He remembered 4 children resting in her arms, remembered her broken lullaby the night Jack had burned with fever. "We will review procedures," Nathan said calmly. "For now, no changes in staff." A flicker of irritation crossed Maggie's eyes. Sophia clenched her file tray until her knuckles whitened. Clara exhaled so faint she dared not let it be heard. As the meeting ended, Maggie stopped Sophia. "Step 2, she said. "The medicine routine." Sophia hesitated. "Mother, the children. We won't harm them." Maggie cut her off, eyes glinting with chilling composure. "We'll only create situations to expose her carelessness." That night, Clara checked the medicine cabinet against the updated list. Everything was in its place, labels clear. She paused at a small bottle of saline, the cap not tightly closed. She tightened it, setting it in the right compartment. Later, Emma fussed, her nose stuffy. Clara took the checked bottle, dropping saline as gently as rain. Emma quieted, eyes fluttering shut. The nursery door opened slightly. Nathan leaned against the frame. His gaze softened. "Is everything all right?" "All right, sir." He turned to leave, then stopped. "I heard the kitchen report about Noah choking today." Clara looked down. I don't know who changed the nipple. I thought I had checked, but maybe I was wrong." Nathan studied her for a long time, weighing between two worlds, the cold precision of procedures and the warmth of an arm that could sing. At last, he said only, "Tomorrow, I'll order a full inspection of all feeding equipment. No one will be blamed without proof." Clara lifted her eyes, brimming. "Thank you, sir." When he left, she finally let out a hard breath. She remembered nights lying on wooden beds, holding the hand of the child beside her so they would both be less afraid. "I must be steady," she told herself. "Steady like when I was 10. The next morning, the technical team inspected supplies. One worker exclaimed, "These nipples are mixed 2 different sizes in one tray." Sophia, nearby, raised her brows. Perhaps someone didn't know how to sort them. Maggie arrived just in time, her voice calm. "Let's not rush to conclusions. What matters is the children's safety." Nathan received the interim report, not enough to assign blame, but enough for him to tighten controls. He ordered color-coded labels for nipple sets, locking caps for solution bottles, and making Maggie's expression briefly falter an extra camera installed directly above the milk prep area. By noon, the kitchen was silent. Sophia stirred soup with her back turned, her shoulders stiff. Something churned inside her, not guilt, not regret, but unease. Nathan's eyes were open, and the new cameras were like sleepless steel birds. Maggie touched her daughter's shoulder lightly. "Stay calm. This is only the beginning." Clara passed through, Olivia in her arms. She paused upon seeing the Dawsons. "Excuse me, I just need the hot water flask." Maggie smiled. "Of course." Clara poured the water, checked the nipple, glanced at the new camera lens, and nodded almost to herself. At the threshold, she paused, pressing her lips to Olivia's forehead. "Your mama isn't here," she whispered, "but Sister Clara will keep you warm." Her words were soft as silk, but in Clara's footsteps there was steel. Upstairs, Nathan stood before a monitor showing 4 kitchen angles. He watched Clara's busy hands, and something in his chest eased. Beside him lay the kitchen negligence report, no longer as heavy as the night before. Deeper within the mansion, 2 other flames still burned, ambition and jealousy waiting to erupt. And the first trial had only just ended, like a tiny hook catching a thick curtain. The rest of the curtain would soon be drawn, revealing a stage of tears, laughter, love, and hate, where every action left a mark, and where an orphaned heart would learn to stand firm on the fragile lines between right and wrong, trust and doubt. On Saturday morning, sunlight poured into the nursery through thin white curtains. On the ivory-painted wooden shelf, a porcelain jade music box, a keepsake of Isabella, lay still like a dream. The lid was engraved with small wings, its edges trimmed with dull gold, and beneath it was a hand-carved line, "For our lullaby." Last night, when the children fussed, Nathan had set it here and gently wound it. The gossamer melody calmed the room. At the end of the hallway, Maggie Dawson stood still, her gaze lingering on the box. For 20 years she had mastered the household's habits. She knew what could be touched and what could not, and she also knew where there were no cameras. "Pay attention," Maggie said quietly as she passed the kitchen, where Sophia was stacking a load of freshly laundered towels. The nursery, right-hand shelf, Mrs. Isabella's music box. At noon we'll assign Clara to dust. You adjust. A little. Sophia looked up. Just a little? Maggie nodded. Don't break it, just enough for people to see she's careless. Near noon, Clara held Noah in her arms, swaying him by instinct. Seeing Maggie arrive, she quickly set the baby in the crib and pulled on her apron. Clara, Maggie's voice was gentle but cold. This noon you'll dust the entire right-hand shelf. Powder residue has collected. We don't want the babies breathing it in. Be careful with the keepsake. She flicked a glance at the music box. Do not wind it. Just wipe it. Yes, Clara answered, her heart suddenly beating fast. That music box? Last night, when Nathan stood at the door, she had seen his eyes soften for a moment at the sound of its melody. Sophia stepped in behind her mother, setting a basket of folded towels on a chair. Use these fresh towels, Clara. Then she hung Clara's apron on the hook. Near the window, an apron, identical to the one Clara always used. Clara washed her hands, tied her hair up, then took the apron from that hook. She grabbed a towel and rose on tiptoe to the shelf. The music box had been set closer to the edge than usual, as if someone had just put it down in a hurry. Clara silently moved it a little inward before dusting around it. The moment her hand touched the lid, there was a soft click. The loose hinge suddenly slipped. The lid snapped shut. The porcelain edge grazed the shelf's rim, and a small piece broke off. Oh, God. Clara froze, her finger dusted with gold powder and a sharp shard of porcelain. A bright red drop of blood sprang out. She set the box down, heart racing, eyes burning. I'm sorry. The door flew open. Maggie entered first, Nathan right behind her, his step faltering at the shard on the shelf. Sophia appeared in the doorway, hands holding the basket of towels as if by chance. What is this? Maggie's voice dropped, carrying a practiced kind of regret. Mrs. Isabella's keepsake. She looked at Clara, her eyes both scolding and pitying. I told you not to touch it. I only… Dusted. Clara's voice shook. The hinge seemed loose. This box's hinge has never been loose. Maggie cut in. The winding key and small repair tools are kept in my locked drawer. Nathan stepped closer and picked up the broken piece. The porcelain burr stung his skin. Last night's melody flashed through his mind, like birds slammed by wind. He looked at Clara. The pocket of her apron bulged slightly. What is that? He asked. Startled, Clara reached in. A tiny winding key, its metal body yellowed with age, fell out and clinked across the shelf. She went rigid. I don't know. The music box key, Maggie said softly, then turned to Nathan. I don't understand why it's in her apron. In that instant, all sound seemed to drain away. Clara heard her own heartbeat in her chest, heard the babies' soft breathing in their cribs, heard the slippery whisper at the far end of the hall. The assistant nanny. I didn't take it, Clara said, her eyes darting, searching for something to hold on to. This morning I just put on the apron from the hook. Maybe someone mixed them up. Sophia executed a deft half-step back, just enough to look as though she was distancing herself from the matter. I hung the apron on the hook, thinking it was Clara's. I didn't notice the pocket. Nathan bent close to the box, his eyes tracing the hinge. A hair-thin scratch along the screw's base. Fresh porcelain dust. The faint circular dust mark on the shelf, shifted off-center, as if the box had been placed back in a hurry at the edge, not in its usual spot. A light scent of laundry detergent clung to Clara's apron. The smell from the kitchen, from Sophia's wash tub. Enough, he said, working to keep his voice even. Maggie, call a porcelain restorer. This music box must be repaired, and from now on, no one touches keepsakes without my permission. Maggie paused, then quickly nodded. Yes, sir. She turned away, a speck of defeat, fine as dust, flickering in her eyes. Clara stood still, her shoulders trembling. Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. I didn't. Nathan looked at her. In that moment, he saw the bead of blood on her fingertip, the way she held back tears for fear of waking the children, and himself 6 months ago, the clumsy man in the delivery room. wanting to hold on to what was slipping away and failing. "Bandage the cut," he said. His tone softened a fraction. "And rest for a while." He paused, then lowered his voice further. "I'll have the hallway and adjoining rooms checked. If anything happened, I want to see it myself." Maggie flicked a glance toward the ceiling, where there was no camera. She pressed her lips together. "I'll remind the tech team. But sir, whatever the case, a good nanny should understand her limits." Nathan met her eyes. "The first limit is my children's safety, then the objects. Today, no staff changes." A muscle twitched at Sophia's jaw. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice smooth. In the afternoon, the tech department sent Nathan a hallway camera excerpt. Sophia passed by twice before cleaning time, carrying a basket of towels, pausing for a few seconds at the nursery door. "She delivered the towels," the staffer explained. "Nothing unusual." Nathan nodded and shut off the screen. What he had wasn't enough to accuse, but enough for him to understand. In this house, there were hands that knew how to move behind the curtain. By evening, the music box was temporarily placed in a padded case awaiting restoration. The wind rose, and the children grew fussy. Clara sat by the cribs, a white bandage now covering the cut on her finger. She didn't have the music box, but she had her voice. "Arroró mi niño, arroró mi sol." The melody flowed fragile yet persistent. Olivia turned. Emma pursed her lips. Noah sighed. Jack drifted. Nathan stood in the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame, his gray eyes lowered as if to hide a storm cooling at last. "A box is only a box," he thought, as the tune laid a thin mist over the room. "The real lullaby is right here." Clara looked up and met his gaze. In those eyes there was no longer only control and discipline. There was a hint of warmth, brief, like a match struck in wind, but enough to illuminate two people, standing on opposite banks, with a bridge slowly taking shape amid the song. In the kitchen, Maggie poured tea, the faint astringency lifting into her nose. "He doesn't trust," she said, as if to reassure herself. "But he does suspect." Sophia braced her hands on the counter's edge, her nails pressing deep into the wood. "So the next step?" Maggie set the cup on its saucer. Porcelain clicked lightly against porcelain. "The past. We can't win at the scene, so we'll win with a story." Her background, orphan's home, previous jobs always offers something to say. Sophia drew a long breath. In her chest, ambition and an unnamed feeling thrashed like a fish caught in a net. "I understand." Upstairs, the lullaby faded, like a thin stream slipping over stone. Clara laid her hand on the crib, her palm warmed by 4 small heartbeats gathered together, and Nathan, standing in the dark, heard himself breathe evenly for the first time in months, not because of an old music box, but because of a voice as new as dawn. The battle within the coal house had entered a new chapter, no longer just traps set with objects, but arrows forged from rumor and records. And there, along those delicate fault lines, something else was quietly growing, something neither Maggie nor Sophia had fully reckoned with. Feeling. Dawn came earlier than usual. The sky poured a pale blue into the nursery, so soft that the 4 cribs seemed to float upon a lake. Clara sat by the window, a thin blanket draped across her lap, holding an old, worn book of poetry she had found on the family's shelf. Verses about how home was not a place, but someone who stayed. She read in a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the fragile sleep so recently won. At the doorway, Nathan stood still. He did not call, nor step inside. After months of hearing nothing but cries, he suddenly discovered the small sounds. The faint rustle of fabric as Clara turned a page, Olivia's steady breathing, Emma's soft suckling. 4 rhythms of life, interwoven with the slender voice of a girl who had once had no home of her own. "Coffee?" Nathan spoke when the poem paused. Clara startled, turning toward him. I don't drink in the early morning." "Tea, then?" He raised a small tray he had prepared, with a pot of warm water and a white porcelain cup. "The doctor said you were up much of the night." She took it, their hands brushing for the briefest moment. "Thank you, sir. Call me Nathan when it's just us." He spoke, then realized he had crossed a line. "I mean, in the nursery. When the children are asleep, we don't need ceremony." Clara lowered her face, smiling faintly. "Yes, Nathan." He sat across from her. "What are you reading?" "About home." She lifted the book. "Back in the orphanage, a Spanish caregiver saved a few lullabies and poems for me. When no one was there, I read them to myself. It made sleep easier." Nathan looked toward the 4 cribs, his voice dropping. "Thank you for reading to my children." In the days that followed, the 4 infants' schedule slowly took shape. Not perfect, but with rhythm. At short midday breaks when Nathan was free, he would stop by the nursery, showing his children how to wrap their tiny fingers around his. Clara was always there, never playing the expert, only gently adjusting his hold, teaching him how to support Noah's neck, how to pat Jack's back so he could burp. "Slow down a little," she whispered. "Let the baby lead." Nathan obeyed, surprised when Jack stopped straining. "Strange. Not strange." Clara smiled softly. "They just want to feel heard." He lifted his gaze, meeting hers. For the first time since Isabella's death, Nathan realized he was learning something that no report or briefing had ever taught him. Listening. Not to reply, but to remain. Late afternoon, sea wind drifted through the garden. Clara carried Emma onto the veranda as Dr. Miller had prescribed. A few minutes of gentle sunlight was good for newborns. Nathan arrived just in time to see her draw a light blanket across, her other hand supporting Emma's head at a perfect angle, just enough for the child to look at the swaying orange trees. "Did you know?" he said, standing at the railing. "Isabella once said she wanted to plant an orange tree here. She said children love the smell of oranges." Clara stayed silent. Some spaces didn't need to be filled with words. "Every time I come near this garden—" Nathan stopped, his chest tightening with an old habit. Swallowing private things back down. "I feel guilty." Clara turned. "Why?" "Because I'm still here." He glanced toward the 4 cribs inside, as if afraid his children might hear. "Because I've begun breathing easier." Clara wanted to say that is natural, but what she chose was something shorter. "Grief is not betrayal, Nathan. It's how we learn to live with what's missing." He was startled by her phrasing. "You speak Spanish, now English too." Clara blushed. "I collected scraps. At the orphanage, we gathered bits of language like seashells. The ones that touched my heart, I kept." Nathan laughed, very softly. The sound startled even him. It rose so simply, as though the long nights had never existed. In the kitchen, Sophia watched the pair through the glass pane. Her lips whitened with pressure. "You saw it, didn't you?" she hissed. He laughed. Maggie did not smile. A laugh is not love. She poured tea. "We weakened the music box. But it wasn't enough. Next comes rumor. Records. You handle her old friends. I'll handle the staff." Sophia swallowed the hot bitterness. "Yes." That night, Olivia tossed and turned. Clara laid her on her chest for a while, skin to skin, as Dr. Miller had once instructed. In the dark, Nathan stood in the doorway, watching the tiny image like a stitch closing 2 torn pieces of fabric. "How long do you do that?" "About 15 minutes is enough," Clara whispered. "At the orphanage, when a baby wouldn't sleep, they placed them close to someone's heartbeat. Newborns remember rhythms in strange ways. If—" He stopped, unsure why he wanted to ask. "If I try?" She looked up, hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. I'll hold steady so you won't fumble." The moment Nathan laid Olivia against his chest, his whole body turned awkward, like a man learning to dance. Clara stood close, her hand lightly at his elbow, guiding with the smallest touches. Olivia nestled in, her breathing shifting from ragged to steady. "You see?" Clara whispered. "She chose your rhythm." Nathan looked down at the not quite 5 kilo being asleep on his heart, then up at the slender girl beside him. An invisible line stretched from one point to the other, simple, wordless, Yet it felt as though he had just stepped through a doorway. Clara. He called her name for the first time without a title. Yes? I don't know how to say this right. Nathan swallowed, his hand on Olivia's back trembling, then steadying. Since she passed, I thought my heart had only one locked room. But you… He stopped, seeing the young woman calmly waiting. You make this house less cold. Clara inhaled. From anyone else, those words might have been polite kindness from the wealthy. But from Nathan, it was a latch undone. I'm here for the children, she said slowly, each word laid like a stone. And for you, she faltered, then corrected. For you, Nathan. But I am a nanny. I don't want to mistake my place. Nathan lifted his eyes. I don't want to force anything either. I just want you to know. In the ashes, there's still a corner warm. I feel it when you sing. Clara clutched the blanket's edge to still her hands. Then, let me keep singing. He smiled, a rare, gentle sadness. All right. The next morning, a decision was made without a meeting. Clara Evans's name was moved from assistant nanny to head nanny in the internal system. Nathan signed without much explanation. Everyone knew the simplest reason. The children slept. When the news reached Sophia, it was like a dull knife, not a deep cut, but enough to burn. She stepped into the hallway, inhaling sharply as the salty wind off the sea hit her face. Maggie arrived a beat later, not asking, only saying, Good. The higher she climbs, the harder she falls. Start contacting the places she's worked. Sophia nodded, her hand already opening a list. A small restaurant, a family she once babysat for, and an old note about the orphanage. That afternoon, Nathan passed the nursery and found Clara laying out 4 tiny knitted hats on the bed, each a soft color. You made these? Yes. She flushed. When I was little, I secretly learned from the janitor. I thought… She paused, eyes moist. I thought hats might help them sleep better. Nathan picked up the gray one, cheap yarn but soft. Thank you. Clara nodded quickly, turning away before anyone could see her eyes. Behind her, Nathan stood for a long time, the tiny hat in his hand like a warm coal. That night, as 4 small heads rested under 4 little hats, and the Spanish lullaby flowed like a dark stream, Nathan touched the words he had avoided his whole life, fearing they would change everything. Clara, he said, standing in the shadow beyond the lamp's reach, his voice hoarse, I think I'm falling in love with you. The room stayed quiet, no thunder, no music, only silence thickening like another blanket over 4 children. Clara did not turn immediately. She placed a hand on her chest, counted 3 beats, then faced him. She swallowed. I feel it too. The words escaped like a secret. But I'm afraid people will say I climbed too high, afraid of wounding Isabella's memory, afraid I'm not enough. Nathan shook his head slowly, as if brushing dust from an old photograph. Her memory doesn't ask me to be alone, and enough is a word for things money can buy. But you are what my money has never touched. Clara closed her eyes, letting a tear fall onto Emma's pink hat. She nodded, very slightly, as if to herself. Then, let's go slowly. For the children, he echoed. And for the first time, those words sounded like a vow shared. Outside, the sea broke against the stone wall, scattering into white foam. Inside, another thread had just been tied, slender, strong, unseen, and already hands were working to cut it. At the end of the hallway, a door closed softly. Sophia laid her phone on the table, the number of an old restaurant manager glowing on the screen. The next stage of the scheme was ready. Sunday noon, the kitchen was empty. Only the ticking of the clock and the lingering scent of vanilla cookies hung in the air. Sophia pulled a chair up to the small window that looked straight onto the back lawn, pinning her phone between shoulder and cheek. Yes, that's right. Clara Evans, she said, lowering her voice. She used to babysit by the hour at the Elliott home on Maple Street, about 3 years ago. I'm a household HR manager and need to verify. On the other end, a tired male voice. I remember her. My son clung to her. But my wife didn't like it. There was a time Clara confronted me about being late, drinking beer in the afternoon. I got mad. She quit. We didn't fire her. Sophia arched a brow. Could you write a few lines, not a fit with our family culture? Just a brief note. Silence for a few seconds. Then a sigh. I don't want trouble. We pay for references. Sophia darted a glance toward the door, her tone smooth as pulled candy. A very neutral line, just not a fit. No one will know what you said. Another beat of quiet. Send the email. Hanging up, Sophia opened a template titled Character Reference, Neutral, Not a Fit, leaving a blank for the signature. In the next tab sat a chat window with Marta, the former janitor at the orphanage where Clara grew up. Marta, can you confirm the old incident about taking formula by mistake? A bubble popped up. The girl didn't take it by mistake. She asked permission because the stock was near expiry, brought it to the baby of a young mother across the street. The shift lead penalized her for going outside protocol. Clara wrote the reason clearly in the log. Why dig up old stuff? Sophia bit her lip. What she wanted was a line in a file, not the whole truth. She screenshot the first half of the message, neatly cropping out the parts about near expiry and had asked permission. At the head of the hall, Maggie approached, holding a light gray file folder. What did you get? Sophia handed over the phone. A not a fit reference, a cropped screenshot saying, took formula out of storage, plus an anonymous email from another sitter. Clara holds children too long, doesn't separate to foster independence. The corner of Maggie's mouth twitched. Good. They don't need the whole story. They need a scent. That afternoon, Nathan received an envelope laid neatly on his desk. In the top left corner, regarding Nanny Clara Evans, for the safety of the 4 children. No sender. The smell of new paper and fresh ink mingled with the sea salt drifting through the cracked window. He opened it. A bare 2-line reference. Not a fit with family culture. A screenshot from the orphanage duty log. Took formula out of storage. 3 anonymous lines. Holds children too much. Causes dependence. Nathan leaned back in his chair. In the distance, he heard Olivia's soft giggle, Noah's feet thumping the crib rail, real sounds, pulling him away from the nameless papers. He folded the envelope, slipped it beneath another stack, and stood. He didn't call anyone. He walked straight to the nursery. Clara was changing Jack's diaper, blonde hair hastily tied back, her hands deft and gentle. Sorry, Jack, she murmured. I let the towel get a little cold. The boy fussed, then fell silent when she pressed her cheek to his forehead, an apology given in skin. Nathan stood outside a few seconds, then tapped lightly. May I come in? Clara looked up and smiled. Yes. He stepped inside, glanced at the 4 cribs before looking at her. There are some papers. About you. Clara froze. The words papers dried her throat. The orphanage had taught her that papers always wielded more power than truth. Can we sit? He asked. She nodded. They sat facing each other, a low table between them with a few half-finished knit caps. Nathan slid the envelope across. I hate the anonymous kind, but I won't pretend I didn't see them. Clara inhaled and pulled out each page. When she saw the screenshot from the old duty log, she let out a laugh, a pained one. The expiration date was the end of the month. I asked permission to bring it to the baby across the street. The mother was 17. I wrote it in the log so no one would lose track. The shift lead punished me because the rule says nothing leaves the storeroom. I accepted that. And the not a fit? I quit because the boy's father drank beer in the afternoon and drove. I set it straight. He got angry. I didn't go back the next day. She looked up, gaze so frank it bristled. I chose. The child sighed. Nathan's hand clenched and loosened on the tabletop. He nodded slowly. Is there anyone at the orphanage? Someone you trust? Clara smiled faintly. Señora Alvarez. She taught me aroro mi niño. She still makes the kids teach each other to sleep with lullabies. Give me her number. Clara recited it, steadily. Nathan dialed then and there, putting the call on speaker. On the other end, a rich, warm woman's voice greeted him in English with a Spanish cadence. Lucia Alvarez here. This is Nathan Cole. I'd like to ask about Clara Evans. A small laugh. My girl? The one who holds a child like her own heart? What do you want to know, young man? Someone sent me a screenshot, saying Clara took formula out of storage. Pff, a soft snort. True. The formula was near expiry. I gave permission. I signed the log that day. Who cut the page in half? Good people aren't afraid of the whole story, Mr. Cole. The room went still. Nathan glanced at Clara. She lowered her head, biting her lip, but her mouth curved into a trembling smile. Clara is the only one who sang to the little ones, even though no one sang to her. Lucia went on. She isn't perfect, but her heart is straight. I vouch for her. Thank you, Nathan said, voice deepening. Thank you for being with her, when no one else was. The call ended. A gentle quiet settled. Nathan put away the phone, pushed the envelope back toward himself as if shoving a shadow away. I'm sorry I let those pages walk into this room. Clara shook her head. It's all right. I've grown used to them. But I haven't, Nathan said, meeting her eyes as if signing a document with his gaze. From today, anything concerning you goes through me first. No more anonymous. Outside the door, a figure withdrew. Maggie stood motionless in the hall's shadow, having heard enough to know the scent had been blown away by the sea breeze. She tilted her head, watching her daughter approach, eyes burning hot. It's fine, Maggie whispered, like reciting a charm. If papers won't win, we'll win with ceremony. You mean? Regulation, inspection, a surprise audit, or a small accident at the right time. She paused, lowering her voice until it thinned like thread but cut like a blade. We'll make her overstep in front of authority, not in front of us. Sophia swallowed the bitterness in her throat. The children. I've said it. Maggie squeezed her daughter's hand. No one touches the children. She pressed each word. We touch the context. That afternoon, the nursing team heard that a process evaluation unit would drop by in the coming week. The news traveled fast, like a cold draft. Jenny Park, a cheerful young nurse, leaned to Clara's ear. Don't worry. You're doing everything right. They're reviewing the whole system. Clara smiled. Thank you. But as she stepped through the kitchen doorframe, she caught Sophia's gaze velvet and steel at once. Something was being tightened, like a drumhead before the stick is raised. That evening, Nathan summoned Maggie to the study. He set the gray envelope on the desk, neither opening it nor pushing it toward her. I don't want my staff judged by anonymous letters. Maggie smiled neatly, as if he had remarked on the weather. I understand, sir, but my duty is to anticipate risk. Anticipation isn't defamation, Nathan replied, his tone still low but slicing the air like a cold knife. From now on, any information about Clara or anyone else comes straight to me, with sources and names. Understood. She nodded, without blinking. I'll do as you wish. Leaving the study, Maggie slowed her steps. She had lived long enough in the houses of the wealthy to know this. When the front door closes, there are still 20 side doors. And if all of them lock, one can always make a new one. That night, Clara sat finishing a cream-colored cap for Noah. The 4 children slept, 4 different hues perched on 4 small heads like tiny points of light on a green blanket. Nathan stood by the window, listening to the knitting needles click rhythm of a home reopening after storm seasons. Would you like to take them out for 5 minutes of early sun tomorrow? He asked. Clara looked up, her eyes bright as if she had just tucked away a streak of worry. Yes, I'll prepare a light blanket. I'll come with you. The sentence was simple as a wooden chair pulled closer, but at the end of the hall, a phone had already dialed the number for Child Protective Services, but with the message, "The Cole household has a nanny without proper credentials who is independently administering medical care at home. The reply, noted. Scheduling an unannounced visit. Sophia looked to her mother. Maggie neither nodded nor shook her head. She only pressed one finger to her lips, silence, and pointed at the wall clock. Time, she knew, was the most faithful ally of those who stand behind the curtain. In the nursery, Clara pressed her lips to Emma's forehead, whispering in Spanish borrowed from memory, "Duarmet." Even as the storm gathered outside, the song held the room like a warm palm. And Nathan, his hand resting on the gray envelope he had shoved deep into the drawer, understood that the coming battle would not be on paper, but before those in authority. He looked at Clara and saw in her the very thing he had decided to stand in front of, a sincerity that did not know how to protect itself. In that moment, neither of them knew that on a very near morning the doorbell would ring. Along with the measured knocking of strangers bearing evaluation forms, questionnaires, and a scrutinizing gaze for every embrace, every knit cap, every drop of saline. The final trial was coming. Morning knocked with a dry, even sound, like a mallet on wood. Two people wearing badges from Child Protective Services stood under the eaves, coats buttoned, eyes more probing than the first light of day. Nathan opened the door with the composure of a man long accustomed to financial audits, but unprepared for this kind of audit. How a home nurtured 4 newborns who had just lost their mother. He invited them in, led them along gleaming corridors where family portraits looked like windows opening onto another time. At the end of the hall, Maggie stood ramrod straight, hands folded before her, a face so proper one could believe she had never known the house's hidden corners. Sophia appeared behind her, apron neat, dark brown eyes tucked away from sight. At the sound of the bell, Clara had gathered Emma to her chest to keep the baby from startling. She set the child in the crib, adjusted the knit cap, then stepped out to greet the visitors like a small breeze passing through a door, making no sound. The process evaluation began with paperwork. One official opened a briefcase, pulled out a printed list of basic newborn care regulations, highlighting unapproved medical interventions and unqualified personnel. The other read out dry questions: who administered saline drops, who practiced skin-to-skin, who determined sleep schedules. For each, Clara answered softly but clearly, "I did," per Dr. Miller's handwritten order on the instruction sheet taped at the head of the bed. "I did, because the doctor said skin-to-skin stabilizes infant's heart rate. I follow the clock, but let the baby lead." Nathan stood beside her and presented the internal SOP he had signed the previous week: color-labeled nipples, locking caps on solutions, additional cameras at the milk prep area. He spoke slowly, as when briefing a board. "I don't buy peace with licenses. I protect it with procedure and with the right person." Then he dialed Miller on speaker. The doctor's voice filled the room, steady and certain. "I am the one who ordered those practices. Clara Evans has followed them correctly and reported appropriately." Everything seemed almost too tidy. If not for a gray envelope, someone slipped into an official's palm. A photo cropped to half a line in an old duty log. An anonymous email saying, "Clara holds children too long," and a 2-line reference letter stating, "not a fit with family culture." Nathan didn't flinch. He had seen them yesterday. He laid 2 more items on the table: a full-page photo of the log with Senora Alvarez's signature, confirming formula near expiry, permission granted to take out for humanitarian purpose, and a reply email from the Elliott household acknowledging conflict over drinking while babysitting. "Half a story always fits what people want to believe," he said quietly. "But I choose to hear the whole." They moved on to direct observation. Clara lifted Noah, washed her hands in the proper sequence, tested the milk temperature on the inside of her wrist, fitted the correctly colored nipple, held him at 45 degrees, fingers supporting his neck, eyes meeting his damp gaze. Noah stopped squirming, sucked slowly, breathed evenly. The official with the name badge tilted her head and marked a neat pass. Her pen hesitated only when Sophia, standing in the kitchen doorway, accidentally called out, Same as last time, any mix-up with nipple sizes, Clara. The air wavered like a pin pushed close to a drumhead. On any other day, it might have rattled Clara. Today, she simply looked up, pointed to the color-labeled nipple tray under the new system, then glanced straight at the small camera above and nodded. Since the new procedure began, I cross-check with the nurse every shift. No more mix-ups. The official wrote on, rounded letters steady. Just as it seemed observation would conclude, Maggie gently signaled to guide the team through Isabella's keepsake room, where the music box awaited restoration. She spoke of sentimental value, of reverence for mementos, of how someone had carelessly chipped a porcelain edge. I do not conclude, she paused with practiced timing, but a good nanny should know her limits. Nathan looked at her, his gaze so calm it was hard to read. He pressed the wall remote, a small screen lit with the hallway excerpts from that day. Sophia, carrying a basket of towels, pausing for seconds at the nursery door, then Clara putting on the apron, hung exactly where Sophia had left it, and finally Clara bending to wipe the shelf, the lid slipping with an oddly decisive movement. "There's no camera in that room," he said, "but there is in the hallway," and the detergent scent on the Clara apron that day matched the kitchen laundry, not the nursery laundry. He did not accuse. He simply let a seam show under the light. The officials exchanged discreet looks. They had visited enough wealthy homes to know some things break for reasons other than clumsy hands. They ended with a brief knowledge check on infant care. Clara answered slowly but surely. When asked, "Why do you hold children too long?" she said, "Because there were nights I had no one to hold me, and I know not every child needs to be independent early. They need to trust that someone will stay. I stay, but I put them down when they are safe." It wasn't in the handbook, but it made the room settle, as if a drop had fallen exactly where the earth was dry. The team gathered their forms, clipped pens to boards, thanked them, and said an official conclusion would follow. Before leaving, the female official paused a heartbeat by the 4 cribs, looked at the tiny knit caps, and smiled faintly. When the door closed, the quiet inside the mansion took shape. Nathan asked everyone to give me 5 minutes alone. He invited Maggie and Sophia to the study. The room had witnessed dozens of deals. Today it would witness a simpler decision worth more than any contract. Nathan placed a thin stack of papers before them. The internal report on kitchen procedure manipulations, unapproved shifts in the placement of supplies, anonymous contacts sending references. He neither raised his voice nor used many words. "I have always respected you both for your years here," he began, "but this house is not a battlefield for ambition. My children are not leverage for status. Today is your last working day at the Cole residence. Legal will reach out regarding severance in accordance with the law, and a driver will take you home to pack." Maggie held her silence a long while, then answered with a sentence that sounded like stone rolling into a well. "I only wanted what was best for this house." Nathan nodded. "What is best for this house is honesty." Sophia pressed her lips together, a wet glint in her eyes like a person watching a dream clap shut. No one argued. Any words would crumble under the weight of 4 steady breaths upstairs. As the 2 women walked the corridor with small, tidy bags, Clara stood by the nursery door, not looking after them, merely laying her hand on Jack's crib, as though setting it on the heartbeat of the house. She turned back in, folded the thin blanket, then found Nathan on the veranda. "I'm sorry for bringing trouble here," she said, voice low. "If I leave, perhaps fewer people will speak ill." Nathan shook his head at once, without the space of a beat. "I don't need a quiet house because you're absent. I need a quiet house because you are here." He looked straight into her eyes, as if sliding a bolt into a door already ajar. "I choose you. Not to replace anyone, but to raise these 4 lives with me. If you're afraid of what people say, I'll stand in front. If you're afraid of procedures, I'll sign everything. You just do what you do best. Stay." Clara's whole face softened like cloth soaking up warm water. She nodded a nod that promised nothing loud, only confirmed a shared breath. "For the children," she said, a smile reaching her eyes. And for you. They did not touch hands, did not embrace, did not exchange any gesture that could be photographed and spun. They stood a body's length apart, listening to the sea tap lightly against the breakwater like a clock starting over. Dusk fell. The kitchen stilled. The cameras glowed with a small light like steel birds keeping watch over a nest. Upstairs, 4 knit caps lay quiet on 4 small heads. Clara sang very softly, and Nathan leaned against the doorframe, one hand in his pocket as always, but his shoulders lowered by half an inch. The front gate closed softly behind the 2 women who had just left. Their last sounds dissolved into the smooth road. Inside, the house drew a long breath, and exhaled as if allowed to do so for the first time. And within that breath, an unspoken vow was quietly signed. From now on, the peace of 4 children would no longer be a matter of luck, but a choice protected each day. The next morning, the house woke to a silence that no longer tasted of worry's salt, but like a thin blanket laid over 4 cribs, softening the light that poured in by half. The kitchen held no more sharp, whispering complaints. The hallway no longer measured footsteps. Jenny brought coffee up to the veranda and said the evaluation team had sent a preliminary email. Process compliant, nurturing environment, appropriate staffing. Words dry on the page but sounding like a sigh, slipping off the shoulders when read aloud. Nathan merely nodded, opened the nursery door, and saw Clara putting the bottles back into the tray in color order, those familiar hands no longer shaking as they had weeks before. He said, "Thank you," his voice dropping into something closer to, "I'm glad you stayed," than to politeness. The 4 children stirred. Jack's ash-gray knit cap tipped to one side, and Emma sucked her lip as if listening to a lullaby. Only she understood. The peace in those scattered details made the house feel like a body just past a fever, beginning to steady its heartbeat. They kept their promise to take the children out for early sun on the veranda. Nathan pushed the double stroller. Clara carried Olivia. Then they switched like a dance that needed no counting. The scent of oranges in the garden mixed with milk, a smell of home both new and very old. Small birds dipped to the fence and sprang up again, sketching random strokes across a sky clear as freshly polished glass. Isabella once said, "Children love the smell of oranges," Nathan said softly, keeping the words from sinking into sorrow and holding them on the surface of the present, like holding a leaf from sinking. "Then we'll plant more," Clara answered, her gaze resting on all 4 children and on his sidelong look. She neither asked permission nor sought to replace a memory. She proposed an action of continuance, to let past and present stand close without colliding. Nathan nodded, his hand tightening on the stroller handle as if signing a signature only the 2 of them could read. A week later, the restorer returned the music box. The chipped porcelain had been mended so deftly that, unless touched, the seam was invisible, and the new hinge was quiet as breath. Nathan set it back in its old place and did not wind it at once. He stood a long time, as if inviting Isabella into the room once more to look at 4 knit caps in a straight row and listen to steady breathing. Then he placed the tiny key in Clara's palm and said, "Keep it for me," his tone no longer commanding. Clara meant to refuse, then nodded gently. The key was so light she could not feel its weight, only a trust placed on her hand, the kind orphans seldom receive, but when they do, they know how to keep. When the melody rose, it was no longer a lullaby of nostalgia. It blended into Clara's song, becoming a thin underlayer, like water seeping into earth instead of sliding across stone. Life in the coal house found its own schedule. Bottles arranged by color, a sleep chart taped inside the cabinet door, tiny dots marking first laughs, first rolls, first ah-ah. Dinner included pumpkin soup that Noah liked, while Olivia kept tugging Nathan's tie as if it were a game requiring great seriousness. Jenny told stories in the hallway that babies choose people with their eyes, and sometimes grown-ups are chosen back. Nathan listened and smiled, no longer hiding things as before. Clara knit 2 more caps, because the sea breeze entered the window earlier. Yarn slipped through her fingers, the needles clicked into a different kind of music, the background hum only houses that are healing can make. One night Olivia cried long with teething. Nathan carried her around the room in slow steps, remembering the instruction, "Let the child lead," and, without thinking, he sang with Clara on a simple refrain, his voice hoarse, off-key, but the four little rhythms seemed to recognize a father learning their language. Clara laughed, not teasing, only adjusting Olivia's chin for more comfort. When the crying fell away, they stood near the window, shoulders not touching yet warmth had, and the silence between them thickened in a pleasant way, like a soft coat. "We'll still go slow," Nathan whispered, not out of fear, but to remember every small rung. "For the children," Clara replied, and in that sentence there was already a part of "for us," not yet needing to be said. At the end of the season, they planted a young orange tree by the low fence. Newport soil is soft, one cut, and the small roots found their way, and the four children sat on a blanket, watching the grown-ups get dirty as if attending a show. Nathan set a small wooden plaque, carved with the four initials of the children, none of the adults' names. "Oranges are sweet because of the hands that tend them, not because of anyone's name," he said, sounding more like asking permission than defining. Clara set her hand on the soil, the coolness passing through the skin to rest at her wrist, the place she had counted heartbeats for the children. She wished for no miracle, only little, sensed ordinary things becoming durable when someone stays to do them together. As they watered, sunlight reflected from the window to the music box on the sill. A thin line of light sliced the room like a needle, stitching two pieces of cloth. On another afternoon, when a family photo was proposed to issue the new staff ID for internal use, Nathan suggested shooting on the veranda beneath the orange's shade. He held Emma, Clara held Jack, Jenny kept Olivia and Noah for a while, then they swapped so everyone could be in each frame somehow. No one said mother, no one named a new role, the photo set no labels, only caught a moment of people learning how to stand close and light. When the shutter clicked, the breeze tossed the blanket like a tiny flag. That picture was not hung in the living room. It lay in an album in the nursery, between feeding schedules and leftover yarn, as if to remind, adults can swear vows in solemn places, but peace is usually signed among small details. The night the official document from the department arrived, no violations, positive assessment, Nathan opened the email on his phone, set it down, and said nothing. He went into the nursery, sat on the edge of the rocker, and listened as Clara reread the poem about a home, not a place, but someone who stays. He said thank you, but the thanks traveled a little farther, touching the spot where people usually say, "I love you," without needing to say it. Clara understood in the way of someone who has learned to read the spaces, and answered, "I'll sing now." And the lullaby flowed like water through a riverbed that had learned its new shape. At the door, Nathan's coat hung beside Clara's white apron, neither mixing nor merging, only standing next to each other. Before the cribs, four knit caps lay quiet, like four temporary periods at the end of a chapter. Later, when all was still, Clara went crib to crib, touching each small chest to feel warm, skin and milk scent, the kind of habit no one teaches. She drew the curtains, looked through the glass at the dark sea, remembered the girl in the orphanage who had hugged herself to sleep, and realized she no longer had to sing alone. Nathan stood at the threshold. Not startling her, the sound of his steps had become part of the house's music. He said, "Sleep," then added, "I'll keep watch," and for the first time the words sounded like a promise rather than a plan. When he wound the key, the music box chimed softly, weaving with Clara's voice into a double strand, tied around four small breaths, and somewhere out in the garden, the orange roots pressed one more centimeter into the earth. After so many storm seasons, the Cole mansion learned how to breathe again, not pant with fear, but exhale long, even, with rhythm. Peace here was no longer luck, nor something bought with money or enforced by procedure, but something kept each day by clean hands, small voices, and people who dare to stay when they're tired. In this quiet, love did not proclaim, did not name itself, did not seek honor. It existed like the warmth of skin to skin, like the small nod before swapping who holds the child, like a key placed on a palm with no demand attached, and like a song traveling from a lacking childhood to a new, sufficient home. And when dawn poured through the line of orange trees and touched 4 knit caps, the house at last knew it had come home. When the house has learned to breathe again, and the lullaby closes small eyes, we understand that peace is not a gift that falls by chance, but is woven by the hands that choose to stay, by kind choices repeated each day. If this story moves you, tonight try calling someone who is tired, hold your child for 1 more minute, put a gentle piece of music into the room, and be fully present with someone. If you feel warm at heart, leave a line of reflection, share the moment that touched you most, and send this story to someone you'd like to gift a quiet night. Those small acts, little by little, will gather into the light of a home.